Hey, so let's talk about fallacies. Now, people used to think a lot about fallacies. People on the right used to point them out all the time. They kind of stopped doing that for a while. It's been a while since I've seen people on the right being hyper aware of fallacious reasoning. This isn't about right wingers in particular. This is about uh, fallacies in general. Now, let's talk about what a fallacy is. The definition of a fallacy is an erroneous, misleading, or false uh, line of reasoning. So, uh, using that definition, there are some things that are fallacies some of the time, but are not always fallacies. Now, there is a fallacy called the fallacy, which says that just because a fallacy is present does not mean that uh, the argument is wrong. So let's talk about an example of a fallacy that is only a fallacy some of the time. Let's talk about correlation equals causation. I actually got into an argument with some people on Twitter about a month ago. I forget exactly what the topic was, but I said the correlation in this case does equal causation. And they were like, correlation never equals causation. Here's where they're wrong. Here's the example. And I gave them this example and they called me ridiculous for this, but I push the power button on my computer. My computer turns on. There is a correlation between me pushing the power button on my computer and my computer turning on. There is also the causation, because pushing the power button on my computer did cause my computer to turn on. In this instance, correlation does equal causation. Now, of course, they called me ridiculous, but they didn't explain why. The only way you could really argue that this is a wrong argument, that I am wrong about this, is if there is no correlation between the power button being between the power button being pushed and the computer turning on, or if there is no causation between the power button being pushed and the computer turning on, and yet we have both. And if you think otherwise, I would advise you to do a quick Google search to figure out what the fuck you're talking about, because correlation just means a relationship between two things. Every cause and effect is correlated. Every single cause and effect is correlated. An example of the correlation equaling causation being a fallacy would be, I hit the power button on my computer and the sky gets dark. That is a fallacy. Those two things are only related by the time that they occurred. They are not causative of each other. They have nothing in actuality to do with each other. It's just pure coincidence. So this is an example of a fallacy, which is not always a fallacy. And again, as I said, every cause and effect is correlated. So every cause and effect is an example of correlation equaling causation, not as a fallacy, not as a misleading, false, or erroneous line of reasoning. Another example that I would give is of the black and white fallacy. Now, and the example I actually have of this being not a fallacy, I'm also going to use for the example of it being a fallacy. So let's take a trip back to 2004. The two newest Pokemon games for the Game Boy Advance were Pokemon Fire Red and Pokemon Leaf Green. I remember because I had them both. And I played them for hundreds of hours. I had a great time with that. Now, let's say you're a kid in 2004 and you're talking with your friends and you say, "Oh, I love the new Pokemon game for the Game Boy Advance, but I don't like Leaf Green." Well, then your friends go, "Oh, so you must like Fire Red." Because there's only those two options. This is black and white thinking that is not fallacious. It is not erroneous. It is not misleading. It is not false. Though there are only two options, if you don't like one, but you do like one of them, you do like one of the options, but you don't like one of them, the other option is the only one you could like. So that is an example of the black and white fallacy not being fallacious. Now, of course, there are people who are like into IFL science, and these people would regularly point out fallacies when they see them, but they still engage in fallacious reasoning. An example of this, I've actually seen a couple of times. People have said, "Oh, I don't support race mixing." And other people are like, "Oh, well, you must support incest." And it's like, okay, we can grant that, even if we grant that incest is the exact polar opposite of race mixing, there is a huge range of options in between those two that aren't either of those two. So that is a fallacy. And I don't understand how these people think that they can just say this and not sound ridiculous saying it. Take me, for example. I am white. If I am not to race mix, that does not mean I'm going to be with my sister. There are literally hundreds of millions of white people that are not related to me. I could date within my own race and not be committing incest. And of course, there a lot of these options, I said grant that they are polar opposites, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there is a spectrum. A lot of these other options could be completely unrelated to these two things. These two things are completely unrelated, technically. So the black and white fallacy is a fallacy, even if you don't recognize it. And I really don't understand how people can be so ridiculous about that. That's a lot like saying that, Japanese people dating other Japanese people is incestuous because they all come from the same tribe or something. I'm not entirely sure that follows. And it is a non sequitur. It is also a non sequitur because it doesn't follow. But yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about fallacies for a bit. People get really ridiculous with them, and people aren't good at thinking critically. You have to think critically because you have to analyze whether or not something is a fallacy in the first place. There's people saying that immigration is not responsible for the crimes caused by immigrants, the crimes committed by immigrants. But that's a direct correlation. That is also causation. The more immigrants you have committing crimes. That's a direct correlation and causation. But if you say that, they accuse you of committing a fallacy, and they just shut down and they don't think about it anymore. And that's not how you're supposed to deal with things. And that's why most logic books do not deal with fallacies. They deal with critical thinking. They teach you how to analyze things, how to analyze the validity of a statement, how to analyze the backing and the grounds, how to analyze the consistency. And I would advise, if you are interested in learning about fallacies or critical thinking, There's a YouTube channel called The Amateur Logician who basically just reviews logic books all the time. And he's got a lot of logic books. And he doesn't have all of the ones that I have, because I have Teaching Arguments by Jennifer Fletcher, which was pretty good. And I also have one by Stephen Toulmin, a textbook of logic by Stephen Toulmin, who was a brilliant British philosopher. And I haven't seen him review either of those books, but I have seen him review Anthony Weston's book, which I do have. But yeah, I would recommend watching that channel and, getting a hold of a book or two on logic yourself. Try to think beyond just fallacy, therefore wrong. That's not how we do things. That's not how you're supposed to do things. Try to think about what makes it wrong, or if it is even wrong at all, because in a lot of instances, it's not wrong. Thank you for watching. Peace.